All right. So I just talked about the $20.5 million and how that's going to affect college athletics and how I feel like BYU is going to be able to absorb that hit better than many athletic departments out there. Now, the question is, does NIL still exist in this post-House settlement world? It absolutely does. And the thing is, I have seen certain people out there that have been saying, hey, BYU's supposed advantages in NIL are going away as a result of this House settlement era. In theory, I guess they could, but the bigger deal is, as part of the settlement, they have now established a clearinghouse that any NIL deal that has a net worth of over $600. So whether that is a media appearance deal, autograph signing, anything that's worth more than $600 has to go through this clearinghouse they're calling NILGo. It's being run by Deloitte Consulting, and the simple fact is that Deloitte Consulting will look at these deals and establish what they consider to be fair market values for various things, and essentially either A, approve the deal, B, reject the deal, or you can send it to arbitration where it gets appealed by both sides and it come to a figure that is, in theory, what this deal is supposed to be worth. Is this going to hold up? No, it's not, because the second that this NILGo essentially disapproves and rejects a deal of any high number of any variety that a legal mind thinks is worth taking up as a legal case, it's going to get sued into oblivion. BYU has a number of NIL partners out there, and there are various companies here in Utah and beyond who are very intent on continuing to help BYU compete at a national level, and that is being able to pay out athletes via NIL. They will put together deals, and they will go through this clearinghouse. Will BYU be the first one that has NILGo tied up in litigation? I highly doubt that, but I know that BYU athletes, if they were worried about their NIL opportunities going away, that's not going away. I have it on very good authority from BYU administrators that the expectation is with this House settlement, NIL is not going anywhere. Now, can you pay a guy multiple millions of dollars just for one or two appearances at your car dealership, for example? No, that probably won't pass that sniff test and probably won't match up with fair market value. But I also question, what does Deloitte know about college athletics? What do they know that is fair market value for various things? That's the big question that has to be answered. The nice part is I'm sure that BYU and their partners, whether it's these companies out there, people working with the collectives and the like, have already been working on putting together contracts and deals that will pass this sniff test. I'm sure they have an idea of what fair market value is or what it's expected to be from this clearinghouse. They probably have had some feedback coming in. And you can expect that people that think that BYU is not going to be competitive in this post-House settlement world, they're up in the night. BYU is still going to compete. They're going to compete very favorably because the boosters that have the money that want to pay BYU athletes and want to make it so that BYU can compete at a national level, they're not going anywhere. That's the thing about this I don't get is that people think that BYU's, I call them air quotes, supposed advantages are going away. They're not going away. They're just changing a little bit. And yes, there may be a deal here and there that gets nixed because this Deloitte Consulting decides that it doesn't pass what they consider to be fair market value. Well, guess what? You go back to the negotiating table and you make it square up and then you resubmit it. How does it affect this podcast, for example? I have had Connor Pay on this podcast for the better part of 2 years with an NIL deal that he and I sat down and hammered out ourselves. We had Clark Barrington on before that. I've done 3 straight seasons of having these offensive linemen on the show, and I've paid them for their appearances. How does it affect going forward with this? Well, if I come to it and I have an athlete or a couple of athletes that I'm interested in, we'll get a contract together. We'll submit it to NILGo and we'll see what they say. I don't think that my contract with any of these players is going to be rejected on the grounds that it doesn't pass market value, but maybe it does. I'm going to be a guinea pig in this, it feels like, and we'll see how it all shakes out. And obviously I'll be keen to pass along anything I learn as I work in the space. But the bigger point is that BYU is going to continue to have athletes cashing in on their name, image, and likeness. And yeah, the $20.5 million that comes as a revenue share, it's just another pot of money for these athletes. We've talked about it on this podcast. I've mentioned it multiple times. If you think that college athletics is being ruined by money, I don't know what I can do to help you out with that, because guess what? They just added $20+ million to these athletes' pockets, and 80 to 90% of that money is going to football and basketball. And I would say in most cases, it's minimum. It feels like 70% is going to football. maybe 10 to 20% going to basketball. Maybe that remaining 10% of that $20 million gets allotted to everybody else in the athletic department. I fully expect BYU to operate that way. I fully expect many athletic departments to operate that way. And those of you asking, well, how does it get affected by Title IX? Well, in the dying days of the Biden administration, they said that it was going to be subject to Title IX. Well, the Trump administration came into office, and all of a sudden there was a reversal of that ruling from the Biden administration and from the education department, saying that these revenues are not required to pass up to the level 9 level. Title IX level, I should say. Title IX will not have an impact on these revenues being doled out. And that's the way that you're able to pay, as said, 80 to 90% of your $20.5 million allotment to football and basketball players while paying relative pennies. Now it's not pennies because 10% of 20 million is still $2 million being doled out, but you get what I'm talking about. The other side of it is BYU will have contracts with these athletes. I know that the football program, they've been drawing up these contracts for quite some time. Maybe they haven't signed them formally until now, but now you will have essentially a contract, whether you're a defensive back, an offensive lineman, a running back, or a quarterback. What you are is you will essentially sit down. BYU will pass a paper across the table to you and say, we BYU are willing to pay you X insert athlete name here this much money as part of our allotment. Now you're paid that much money via the revenue share. You already get your full scholarship. You get your cost of living stipend. You get your Alston case money, which is obviously paying multiple thousands of dollars. And now, yeah, it could be somewhere in the hundreds of $1,000s to up to $1 million, it feels like, if you're a top shelf athlete when it comes to this House Settlement era. But then beyond that, if a company wants to reward you and wants you to make appearances at their dealership, I guess I use car dealers as an example, but it could be anything. You could go and be a spokesperson in commercials for a local company and that like. NIL is not going anywhere. And BYU will continue to be able to reward their athletes, if you're a company out there that wants to do so, richly. And obviously, like I said, it has to go through the formal process of being approved by this clearinghouse. But to think that we're all speaking collectively as college athletics going to abide by these rules and there's not going to be any, hijinks going on, it's going to happen. And like I said, I expect the NILGo will be sued into oblivion at some point because there's going to be some athlete somewhere who has a deal nix and they're going to be upset about it. They're going to hire a lawyer, and that lawyer is going to say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a household name for myself. I'm going to have billable hours for days. If you think that settlements and lawsuits and the like have gone by the wayside in this era of college athletics, they've gone nowhere. And in fact, it could get worse in many respects if athletes aren't getting what they feel like is the money that's owed to them. This is supposed to allow athletes to make the money that's been withheld from them for years. But in some ways, it may actually tie up more money than the NCAA cares to really acknowledge, and could find themselves once again in the crosshairs with a whole nother set of lawsuits. That's kind of what the reality of this is. And it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good for anybody out there, but hey, we're talking about a sport and a college athletics universe out there that really it's unregulated, and it has been unregulated for quite some time. This is in theory supposed to bring regulation with this House settlement, but in some ways it just changes the regulations to maybe where it gets sued once again, and we have a whole nother future coming in some short order. But for now, this is the era we're existing in. And my overall point I should make is that if you think BYU's supposed advantages are going anywhere, they're not. BYU will continue to compete very favorably. And in fact, it actually may help BYU in some level at being even more advantageous because, as I mentioned, they'll be able to pay out the money more readily in terms of the athletic department. And also, they've got a lot of partners out there in the NIL space who are still very capable and ready to pay athletes as well. All right. Final question I want to answer on today's show, and I've been kind of hitting different things coming to my mind as we hit this, but how does it affect you, the fan? Quite frankly, where is it going to hit you in the pocketbook? Well, there's not a clear answer on that quite yet, but I have an idea of how it's most directly going to impact college fans and BYU fans in particular. And we'll finish up today's podcast on that note next.